MIT has ordered protesters to clear out the pro-Palestine encampment on its campus, just days after students at Tufts removed theirs after their university threatened arrests, suspensions, and other sanctions over their demonstrations against Israel's attacks in Gaza and the school's financial ties to the country. The threat of arrests became real at some of the Boston area campus protests, like the one at Emerson College, where police arrested more than 100 people a couple weeks back. Their response drew plenty of criticism, including from City Councilor Ben Weber, who said, in part, no one should be arrested for expressing their political views, and if we as a city, in conjunction with universities, cannot find a way to allow for peaceful protests, we are in a sorry state. Weber is also one of 11 City Council members who voted in favor of a resolution calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire between Israel and Palestine this past week. Councilor Weber joins me now, along with Yawu Miller, co-founder of the Greater Boston News Bureau. Yawu, Councilor Weber, thank you so much for being with me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Councilor, I want to start with you. Boston normally heralds itself as a leader on hard issues facing the world, but there's been an effort to get a resolution passed pretty much since last October when the Israel-Hamas conflict began. It's May 2024 now, and Boston's resolution follows those from Somerville and Medford and Cambridge. Why did it take so long, and what should the public make of the fact that it did take so long to get a resolution?
Well, I thought it was important that we address the issue, and in fact, it was one of the first things that I worked on when I joined the council in January. I think it's a very difficult issue, and it's something that the world's been grappling with, since October 7th, and we have a lot of different groups here in Boston, and I think it rather a difference here is that we had to address the needs of a lot of different groups, and it was something that took more time than in those other towns.
I know some local and regional organizations were vocally opposed to the resolution as it passed. What's been the response among your constituents?
Well, one of the reasons why I thought it was important to work on this is because I heard from my constituents, immediately after October 7th and once I took office. And, what I heard was an incredibly broad range of reactions. I heard from Jews with connections to Israel who felt like, their very humanity was being denied because the pain and suffering they felt on October 7th wasn't being recognized. I also heard from Palestinians who are my constituents as well, who felt like, their suffering prior to October 7th wasn't being recognized, and then people were not doing enough to stop the carnage, associated with Israel's actions in Gaza. So since the resolutions passed, I've heard, I think most people, even regardless of what side of the line they fall on, want to see an end to the violence in Gaza. And I've heard mostly supportive things. Some people don't feel like we went far enough. Others feel like we shouldn't have addressed this to begin with. But, my personal belief is that I don't want to see, what is happening in Gaza continue. And, what little I could do as a Boston City Councilor was to help push for, a ceasefire resolution on the floor.
We should note now that at the time of recording this show, we're hearing reports of Hamas accepting a potential ceasefire agreement. No word yet on Israel's response. And however one views the conflict, the tangential issues that stem from the conflict do directly affect city constituents. And in a town known for its world-class education institutions, that has meant protests on college campuses. After the council passed its ceasefire resolution, Mayor Michelle Wu came out with this statement. saying she supports a path for peace, return of hostages to Israel, and humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. Yawu Miller, in the last few weeks, she's canceled a scheduled appearance at Harvard after student groups withdrew support for the event. They were upset over her involvement in the decision to send police into a pro-Palestine student encampment at Emerson College. The mayor said that she and the police commissioner made that decision jointly. Beyond the Harvard cancellation, what's been the wider response to the mayor?
I think during the mayor's coffee hours in Rosendale and other neighborhoods, she's been accosted by some of the Emerson students who were arrested, others who were in support of them. I mean, I think people were upset at the level of brutality that the police unleashed on the protesters. People were taken aback. Some of the protesters were slammed to the ground. Some of the women complained that their jobs were ripped off. There were injuries, hospitalizations. And, this was for a nonviolent protest. Presumably, the concern was, according to the mayor, that there were fire exits that were blocked by tents. The response, there in Emerson, arresting more than 100 students. At Northeastern, another 100 students were arrested. It's controversial.
I want to note that we have some video of the mayor being accosted at the coffee hour by someone who was involved in the protest. Take a look.
Oh, my body parts. We were screaming for them to stop. We were pleading for them to stop. They continue to drag us on the ground. My friend has documentation of him being strangulated until he was unconscious. I'm in a neck brace. I'm gonna have to get neck surgery. I didn't do nothing.
Did you see them power wash the blood off the streets after they beat the out of us? Did you see that?
Bloody knuckles from the gang unit? A gang unit. I don't see no riot. Why you have to have riot here? I don't know. Review the stuff. You do not care about refugees and Palestinians being genocided in their homeland. And if you did, you would have said some shit earlier. That's all I got to say to you. I don't want to hear nothing.
This is a very general statement. These are very general.
I don't really care about generalized statements.
Councilor Weber, turning to you, you issued that statement on Twitter calling the increased police response to the protests in Boston and elsewhere, quote, deeply concerning. How do you feel about those words as you sit here now today and you're looking at the mayor getting some pushback for that decision?
Well, I think that I issued my statement because this was, I think, the second set of arrests of protesters, and I did not want to see escalated confrontations between, police and protesters across the country. I think that when you send in police to stop people from their engaging in political speech, you're going to end up, with violence like we saw. And I just hope we don't see any more.
Yawu, it's a hard thing to balance. It's even risen to the level of national politics. We have a video of President Biden just talking about the balance that folks need to strike.
We are not an authoritarian nation where we silence people or squash dissent. The American people are heard. In fact, peaceful protest is in the best tradition of how Americans respond to consequential issues. But neither are we a lawless country.
So what are you hearing from folks about how to balance that lack of lawlessness or the perceived lack of lawlessness with a First Amendment right?
I mean, I think nationally we've seen more than 2,000 students arrested with, in I think it was University of Texas, they were firing, rubber-coated steel bullets at protesters. There's been tear gas, pepper spray. It's an interesting contrast nationally and in Boston with other protests. For instance, back in the 1980s when people were protesting for divestment from businesses that were invested in South Africa, there wasn't that, students weren't getting arrested. In many cases, they weren't getting arrested. The shanties were staying up on college campuses for, weeks on end. And, there was discussion and dialogue around, divestment. And I think that that's happened at a handful of colleges. But, I mean, the police response is overwhelming. It's more reminiscent of what happened during Vietnam, which was something that didn't go down well in history. So, yeah, I think nationally people are recognizing that it's almost as if there's a double standard. Here in Boston, the police are monitoring these pro-Palestinian protests. You're seeing the Boston Regional Intelligence Center. They released reams of intelligence reports to the Muslim Justice League. Yet, when in 2022, in the summertime, July 2022, when the Patriot Front marched through downtown Boston, 100 people with shields, they assaulted a black man. There was absolutely no police presence during that entire incident, and apparently no intelligence. It was as if even though reporters knew this was happening, the police didn't. So it's you can clearly see some double standards here.
Councilor Weber, I want to turn back to you and ask, what message do you want Boston to be sending to young people about getting involved in politics? And what response do you think would embody that best?
Well, I want us to send a message that we welcome, peaceful demonstrations and political speech, and it's not going to be, met with, with arrests, and we definitely don't want to see anyone get hurt. I think we just heard about Vietnam demonstrations. Watching in the early days of the arrests, this is before my time, but I thought about Kent State, Jackson State. We don't want to see anyone get hurt. But the other thing that also made me think of was how demonstrations in 1968 helped us wind up with Richard Nixon as a president. And we're heading into an important election. And I know that in Republican circles, they're all too happy to fan the flames of this, for their own purposes. And so, I hope we can learn from 1968, 1970, not repeat those mistakes today.
Yawu Miller, speaking of elections, I'm going to give you the last word here. What are the political implications, if there are any, for the mayor when she's looking at re-election in the next year?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say who's running against her. She certainly seems like she may have alienated some of the more progressive elements in Boston, but depending on whether if she has an opponent, a lot would depend on who that opponent is. It's, as you know, very difficult, if not impossible, to unseat a sitting mayor in Boston. So, it really remains to be seen.
Yawu Miller, Councilor Ben Weber, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.